I am obviously starting with a big question that I'm hoping we can all dig into a little bit. Can I start by asking how many people who are here are on sort of the content creation side? And how many here are on more of the platform, building, delivering services side? Cool. So I'm Phoebe Connolly from the Washington Post, and we sit squarely in the middle of that, but we didn't used to. We didn't used to have our own CMS, and when I joined the Post 4 years ago, we made the decision to build our own video CMS, which is what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. And I'm hoping by the end of it, you'll have some insight into the choices that we made and into a system that we're both enormously proud of, and I think I can comfortably say across the newsroom is really regarded as one of our most functional CMSs, which is great to hear, especially when I hear it from teams that are not my own team, so I know they have no skin in the game of complimenting me. So I'm here to talk about Goldfish, which is a video platform and content management system that the Post built over the past 4 years, and to help hopefully demystify a little bit about why a media company decided to build a software product. As I mentioned, I'm Phoebe Connolly. That's my Twitter handle. I'm the executive producer for video at the Washington Post. So I am cited in the newsroom. I'm not over on the development side. But within the Post, we've really tried to break down that distinction. So it doesn't matter where you're cited in the building. The important thing is that you're invested in the product and that you're willing to have open conversations. I also want to mention Vidya Viswanathan. She's my partner in crime, and she is our principal architect who I've really worked with closely on developing and building Goldfish. And if you all have interacted with the Post at all on a tech side, you've probably interacted with Vidya. So just to get started, I want to talk a little bit about our video strategy. When I joined the Post, our department was around 10 to 12 people. And at that time, we expanded to a department of 40. It was a big investment by the Post, a decision to start producing more and more video content as part of how we did storytelling across the board, both breaking news, long form, investigative. We already had a strong core of the department, and the Post was interested in finding out what happened if we really put more resources towards that. And what happened was we saw a huge amount of growth. So the numbers here are numbers for the Washington Post site-wide. We saw huge year-over-year growth in our unique visitors within the United States, but also outside the United States. And when you dig into the picture just for video, the story got even stronger. We broke a new record for ourselves in February of this year. We surpassed 20 million total video starts. I think the unique video viewers number is really impressive. And I also think one thing I really want to call out is the time spent per viewer, that 5.6. And I know because I'm really in touch with what we're publishing every day, most of our videos are around 2 minutes long. So what we're seeing here is that people are watching more than one video, which for us is a huge success story. But I do know that part of why we were able to get here is because we had publishing tools that were really seamless to use. And that was a decision by the Post, because we do see that our stories do better if the people who are writing the stories are absolutely involved in the headline writing, in the publishing, in the pushing out on various social platforms. So how do we make that work for video, which is much more complex than just publishing a text story? Jeff Bezos, our new owner, gave this quote recently at the opening of our new building. But I do think that it speaks a lot to the spirit of how we've developed our platforms at the Post, which is that we're not afraid to experiment, we're not afraid to try, and that no idea is sort of off the table when it comes to structuring new systems. So I arrived in 2013, and we decided to build Goldfish, which was going to be our video CMS and quickly evolved into being our video platform overall. To help explain how we got there, I'd like to talk about where we were in 2013. So a producer would say, I'm ready to publish my video. And the first step would be they would have to upload it to Ooyala, which was both our video platform and our player at the time. But it didn't stop there. They also had to upload it to YouTube because we were simultaneously publishing our content to YouTube. They had to make sure the video story existed within Methode, which was our text publishing platform, so that videos could be associated with stories, and also ensure that that code worked in WordPress, which was our blogging platform. Then we had all of our partner feeds that went out, set-top boxes. This didn't happen in 2013, but all of the social networks which showed up later, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera. the number of steps that a user had to take to get their content out there meant that not only were they spending an inordinate amount of time just publishing content, but we would lose valuable data across these platforms. I mean, even a really conscientious user would be hard-pressed to ensure that they put in the exact same keywords in Uyala as they were putting into Methode. And at the end of the day, it meant that when we tried to do any back-looking at how our videos performed, how they were doing, if we, God forbid, had to make a change to a video, it was a very complex process. So this is where we're at now. You want to publish a video, you go to Goldfish. Goldfish connects to all of these platforms and simultaneously sends it out. It's a one-stop process. You make the choice in here as to if you, for example, don't want to put it out on social for whatever reason. That's a channel you can easily turn off. But for what the users inside the newsroom, it means that publishing is one step as opposed to being a multi-step process. So we started this process of development in 2013. We had 3 principles that we really looked to guide every decision that we made, whether it was the tools we used, the roadmap we were putting together that year, or what we were developing one. So the first thing, which was really important to me, was that a new hire could use Goldfish without a manual. Second, every technical process that worked within Goldfish had to be replaceable. We all know from working in this space that the player that is great now is not going to be the cutting edge player 2 years from now. Same thing with transcoding or a CDN. You're going to want to make those switches, and we wanted Goldfish to be flexible enough that we wouldn't have to rebuild it every time we wanted to make a process change. And then finally, and this is something we're particularly proud of, which is that the newsroom was willing to absorb extra work in the short term in order to get the product into the hands of our users faster and in order to be able to deploy more rapidly. So you may ask, how did you convince your boss to let you build a platform without a manual that he could pass around and show users? First of all, I really do believe that not having a manual forced us to build a system that was simple enough that people could just jump into it and understand it. So one of the first things that we did is whenever possible, we really clearly renamed fields, what processes were involved, and we always put help text, right? A key example for us is we have 2 different sort of caption or blurb fields for our video. One's called blurb and one is called tease. If you were to open up that CMS, none of you would have any idea what a blurb did versus a tease did. Instead, we put help text in that says the blurb is a longer caption that will mostly appear on desktop. The tease is a character-limited caption of 140 characters that's going to appear on mobile, apps, and anywhere else where we're limited for space. The second thing is that we ask the user 2 questions at the very start of the process, and based on what they answer for those 2 questions, we autocomplete a bunch of metadata, probably around 60% of the metadata they would have to put in. Once they enter into the video file, they can delete that, they can change that, but for probably 80% of users, they can just leave it as is and get that video published much, much faster. And then finally, about every 3 months, we go through Goldfish and do a complete sweep of all of the choices, buttons, radio buttons, et cetera, that are presented to users, and anything that is not commonly used, we hide under an advanced tab. We still want users to have access to those, but if you're entering that product for the first time, you shouldn't have to see choices that more likely than not, you won't actually have to use. So on to that second principle, the idea that every technical process is replaceable. One of the things I love about Goldfish is that we've already really overhauled in just 4 years what powers the back end of Goldfish. When we built this, our player, our CDN, and our transcoding process were all Uyala. And over time, we replaced pieces of those process. And for our users within the newsroom, most of them had no idea that we were actually doing that. What we were doing is taking out pieces on the back end or even adding in. When we replaced Uyala transcoding with Amazon's Elastic transcoder, we just double processed all videos for around 4 months while we did QA testing, while we really ensured the platform was stable. Then we went through the process of re-encoding old videos. And then finally, we completely switched over. I'm probably one of 3 people in the newsroom who even knew that that was going on at the time. For the user end, it was stable. For us on the back end, we were replacing a process. Which is a nice transition just to walking into how Goldfish works. So on the video publishing end, you'll see Goldfish is powered off of our video CMS database. We use Mongo for that. Our video studio also connects to Goldfish, which affects how we set up and stream live events. I'll get into that a little bit later. Our encoding piece is all handled by Elastic Transcoder. We're currently using CloudFront for our CDN. And you can see the web and app players. Our live streaming service, we're using two right now, YouTube and Wowza. And then also we have external video sources that are coming in addition to original content creation. Those are wire services. We're a newspaper, so we use both the Associated Press and Reuters, and those come in to Goldfish automatically as well, so that users don't have to interface with a separate CMS for those sources. I also want to talk a little bit about the timeline, just to get a sense of what we've tackled over the past 4 years. So March 2013, I joined the Post and was invited to a meeting. We were trying to spec out what this system was. And we prototyped and launched very quickly. By August of 2013, the tool was released into the newsroom. Users were using it. It was our main publishing vehicle. The following year, we started replacing some of those back-end components. That's when we integrated the Elastic Transcoder. And by the end of that year, we had integrated JW Player. And I'm happy to talk about this a little bit later, but part of why we wanted to go with JW Player is because the Post builds so many enterprise, creative, and one-off digital products. We wanted a player that had a lot more flexibility for our developers in the newsroom to be able to go in and customize it on a project-by-project basis. In October of 2015, we integrated with Facebook so that we could simultaneously publish all of our videos both within articles where they were embedded for Facebook Instant Articles, and then also as a standalone video product within Facebook. In December of 2015, we launched on Apple TV. That was both for video on demand and for live streaming on Apple TV. And then in January of 2016, we fully stood up our live streaming with Wowza. We'd been doing it as one-off tests toward the end of 2015, but by January of 2016, every live event that we did was simultaneously broadcast on both YouTube and Wowza. So let's get into that tricky sort of last piece, where I said that the newsroom was willing to absorb work. It is something that I'm particularly proud of when it comes to the CMS, because I think it really strengthened the bonds of trust between our developers and the users in the newsroom. And that doesn't mean we were willing to put up with a broken product, but it really integrated into the newsroom and into our user base a sense of what a minimum viable product was and what it meant to sort of roll things out feature by feature as opposed to waiting until you got the entire full feature set at once. My favorite example, which is actually ongoing right now as we speak, is how we've integrated GIFs into Goldfish. So GIFs are the cousin of videos. They're great for promotion. We find that they really increase video starts when you're talking about platforms like Twitter or Tumblr. And we've also been experimenting with them as cover images on videos to sort of entice the user to jump in. So how did we roll this out? The very first thing we did is we said, okay, what's the simplest way that we can make a GIF for every video that we publish? And that's the GIF that you see on that left, that portrait. That was part of a huge collaboration that we did between a bunch of animators and poets, and the animators animated the poems. It's a beautiful project. I really encourage you to check it out. So the first thing we did is we would just make a GIF off the first 5 seconds of the video. And for a lot of videos like that animation, it's a great GIF. But we knew that there were still other videos where that first 5 seconds just wasn't going to cut it. So the night that Ted Cruz dropped out of the race, he had this very awkward moment with his wife. That didn't happen until much later in the video that we actually published about that. So if V1 was saying, we're just going to build you a GIF, V2, which rolled out 2 weeks later, allowed users to upload their own GIFs, which is what happened in that second case. What we're working on right now, and we're literally in the middle of bug testing this, so this is really exciting to talk about, is to allow our users to put in time codes and custom cut a GIF within Goldfish. And the bagel GIF on the bottom, we just published a recipe about how to make bagels at home, was one of the tests that we ran through the system. So there's a sense on the newsroom of, yeah, we're going to give you some tools, and they won't be everything you want, but if you're willing to bear with us, something that would be waiting 6 weeks for you to get all of these features means that you get some of them early, and then we progress on and on. Poor Heidi Cruz. Something else which we did is we didn't have a full dedicated UI UX designer on Goldfish until it had already existed for 3 years. So this is what it looked like. These, very minimal, not great, a lot of not beautiful design. Definitely when we finally got a full-time UI UX designer at the end of last year, he looked at this and he was like, oh, okay. I was like, don't worry, we made most of those choices. You're not insulting anybody by telling us how ugly they are. But what it meant is that now we have this really beautiful platform, and a lot of the choices that we made initially really actually rolled into how that designer ended up laying out the page. It was worth the wait for us. And ultimately, our product didn't change that much because we had to make a lot of smart design choices from the start because we didn't have a designer that we could just toss problems to. So what happens after you build a platform? You build a platform, you build a CMS, you roll it out to your user base, you're doing some maintenance on the back end, you're making technical improvements throughout. What we found is that once we had our own platform, it opened up the ability for us to experiment with new features very rapidly with our own prototyping without having to put in complex feature requests. So the first one I want to talk about is display testing. We had talked to a lot of vendors and spoken internally about a desire to be able to test how users interacted on click-through to different thumbnails and different headlines. A different department within the Post had stood up Bendito, which is a testing stack. If you want to know more, there's a great blog post that they wrote really outlining how it works. It's not actually A/B testing. We're testing multiple variants at the same time. Our users have real-time feedback on the performance of the tests that they're running at any given time. And at the end of it, they don't have to make a choice. They can go and stop the test if they don't like the results or if we make a different editorial decision about what's going to display. But if they do nothing, whatever combination of headline and thumbnail wins is just going to be displayed to user. So let's look at how this works. So this is a video by Dana Milbank. And what Dana did was, go ahead and show you the results of the test before we're done. So Dana wrote a column about 6 months ago saying that if Donald Trump won the nomination, that he would eat his own column. So we paired him up with one of our food columnists who was going to make him a bunch of recipes so that he could actually eat newsprint. And this is the video that we made. So if you're in here, there's the video title, UUID. My editor went over to Bendito. Again, they can see what they've already put in. The first thing they do is they click to enable testing. That will also allow the user to go back and turn off testing if they decide they don't want to be testing this. They add a thumbnail, that's a direct upload. Searching method, that's our database of all images available at the Post. They can add as many titles as they want. And then if you scroll down, they can see all of the different matches, all of the variants that will be tested on the front end to see what do readers want to see. You can see there's a bunch of different options here, right? Far away shot, a close-up shot, a GIF, 3 different headlines. Well, I've already given away the fun part of this, but this ended up being the combination that actually won in the back end. So we rolled this out 3 weeks ago. We are running probably around 6 tests a week. Again, with the sense that the newsroom is the core tester. We have 4 editors on our team who are really in charge of running all of these tests and who are suggesting improvements on the back end. We're already thinking about new things that we want to do. For example, it would be nice for us, and we've already written this up as a feature request, to be able to link specific headlines and thumbnails. But part of what's exciting is that's not a feature that we necessarily would have come up with in advance. It was really getting it immediately into the hands of the users, letting them use it in the real world and say, hey, this is something that we'd like to be able to do. The other next feature that we're going to roll out is the ability for you to run tests only in specific sections of the paper. So let's say you really want to see if readers who are encountering a video in the context of our op-ed pages, which is where Dana writes, are interested in a different headline and thumbnail, but you want it to be a little bit straighter for other sections of the paper, like the food section, where you might not want to play with something that was just as controversial as this. So another area where we've done a lot of improvement is our live streaming. So as we added on different live streaming providers, we added to complexity of the workflow. Right now, the state that we're at, which is a pretty stable state, is that creating a live event within Goldfish backend will automatically start it in both Wowza and in YouTube. So the user doesn't separately have to log into YouTube and start a live event there. We've also, really from trial and error, changed over from a typical video creation model into something which is it borrows the vocabulary of scheduling a calendar invite for someone. And I'll show you some mocks of that in a second. And then the final thing is that we were able to really expand the presentation layer to homepage Washington Post modules that would show captions and that could fit into any art slot that was available. So when we talk about scheduling, this is what I mean. The Washington Post has 4 different live channels. When you schedule an event, you can already sort of see which channels are going to be available during the time periods that you're interested in. And you can hover over and find out what they are. So if something is really booked up, you can see if there's an event that maybe isn't as important as you thought it was, you can cancel it and schedule the event that you want. And then similarly, all of the events are displayed down below, and using the caret to open them up will give you more information about the event. We're talking about the front-end display. This was a screenshot of our homepage from the night of the Democratic debate that we co-hosted with Univision down in Miami. That entire main art slot is all a video player. We're inserting the graphics back within the studio. I didn't capture it here, but if you scroll over, you still have all of the controls, and you can turn on and off captions. The thing that I am really impressed with here, which took a lot of testing, is that we were able to make this light enough that we could keep our right rail video player, which you see off to the side on the page, without seeing a degradation in performance on page load. And then finally, we also, as I mentioned, have integration with Apple TV, and so we can choose to send any of our live events to our Apple TV video app. And we also allow the user controls if they want to overwrite the headline, the display copy, any of the metadata to play better in an Apple TV environment than it would necessarily on our site. This is from this Monday with the transit of Mercury that happened. So the final thing is something that I actually thought would break Goldfish when we started getting into it, because it was adding in a layer of complexity that I feared would really destroy the user interface. And in fact, it has really opened up what an individual user is able to do, which is that we introduced both versioning and platforming. And when I say both versioning and platforming, the first thing we did was versioning. So for any individual video, you can upload multiple versions of that video and then choose which one is displayed on the user-facing end. That was really important to us as a newsroom because in a breaking news situation, you will have changing of facts, new footage that comes in, or a story that's developing. But what we found in everyday use is that there would be a disruption on the user-facing end. If we did the swapping of video files within one individual file, the user for some period of time while that video was encoding would see a broken experience. Or the alternate was for us to come up with a whole new video file to put V2 in. Well, that was problematic again, because then within our back end, we would have multiple versions of the same video, which was truly just one video. And we then had to go through the process of ensuring that any of the places that that video had gotten to, we put a redirect on to show to the new video. Versioning in our back end allowed us to say, we're uploading a second file. Once that file is fully encoded, we swap it on the back end. This is also something we've built in. It takes about a 5-minute delay for it to fully push across platforms, but we have a back-end communication with our developers who can force it through, and that will take about a minute. We rarely need to use that. Only in extreme breaking news situations would we need to update a file that quickly. So then platforming is a step beyond that. If you can version within a video file, you also sometimes need to do a separate cut for a different platform. Perhaps for an OTT device, you want to let that video go for another minute or 2 minutes longer because in that situation on Apple TV or Roku, your user is going to want to give you more time than they will necessarily on a desktop. But we didn't want to lose the idea of versioning. So that was where we really sat down both with users and with our UI UX designer and talked about what that would look like, which I'll show you in just a second. And then finally, we built the entire model around 4 platforms initially. So we have a master file, then there's a mobile, a set-top, and Facebook. But at any point, we can add more models in there as we add distribution platforms that we may want a version for. So this is what this looks like for the user. You can see in the background, that's your master video file. And we're asking you which platform you want to add, mobile, Facebook, and set-top. And then if you want to inherit metadata from that master file, or do you want to start from scratch? Perhaps for set-top boxes, you want to write a fresh headline, or for Facebook, you want to be slightly more provocative. And then you can create a new file. Within any of those, you're still able to version different versions of that video file. So versioning hasn't been lost for any of them. You can choose to save versions across platforms, or you can upload new versions on a platform-specific basis. So that's my quick overview of Goldfish. I'm really excited to take your questions. The big lesson that we learned out of all of this is that video storytellers should be telling stories and not tangled up in the mechanics of publishing. And we've reached that place at the Post, and we're really happy and proud of where we've gotten. And the final thought that I just want to leave you with is that video product is strongest when it's a collaboration between creators and developers. Either side, and it will become too unbalanced about the features that you're adding in or how quickly you can get to the goals of actually launching a usable platform. But what we found at the Post is having a collaboration between the newsroom and between our developers really allowed us to stand up a strong product that we think is incredibly usable. So I look forward to questions. Yeah?
So when you go across multiple platforms, how much of the metadata can be reused? For example, do you have like a different title on Facebook versus YouTube versus on platform?
So one of the things we do across is that if the user does nothing, if the user is just like, please, I want to add Facebook as a platform, we'll just dupe all of the metadata. But they always can go back and say, no, I want to scrap this. Even if they say, yes, carry over all the metadata, once they're within that platform, if they want to delete the title and write fresh, they absolutely can. And to go sort of one step deeper on that, sometimes there's not always clean metadata matches, right? We have a config tab that power users can use, where we just really simply show the beginning example that we started with was Uyala and Methode. They had very different metadata fields, so we just mapped them one to one, what we wanted to correspond to another. But at any point, we can go in, a power user can go in and say, I no longer want keywords to sort into this keywords field, right? It should be different, it should be tags into keywords or what have you. But not putting that in the hands of everyday users, we found just really simplified things. Most people don't want that level of choice. Oh, that's a great question. So it's kind of a twofold answer. One is really a technical answer, which is that YouTube has really mastered cross-platform. So we were able to ensure performance and playback on certain Android devices, et cetera, that we couldn't necessarily ensure that in iPhone as well. We struggled a little bit with various platforms that we had. But then secondarily, the newsroom really sees YouTube both as a platform that we're publishing on, but also as a social network. So for us, that's a social play as well, in the same way that we see Facebook, et cetera. I wouldn't be surprised if this summer we roll out the ability within that same live event creation to send to Facebook Live. Yeah.
I have a question. We have a similar situation where we set up some stuff to automatically publish. What I find sometimes on YouTube is when you have sort of the auto-publishing, I do notice that you guys have a little bit more customization for your description, which is great. But sometimes when you just sort of throw stuff out there and there's not the level of user engagement, do you still allow your reporters to kind of go on YouTube?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What we've done is we actually have one of our editors who had a really strong social background. So they sort of own the YouTube channel. So does that mean they're in there all the time? No. But every couple of days, or sometimes every day if it's a slightly less busy news week, they'll go in, curate, clean up, promote, put different videos in different places. So on platforms where we think it's worth our attention and time, we'll both handle it from a CMS level and then also by logging into that platform. And other ones where it matters less to us, we'll just let it become an automated feed.
Just curious if this bridges with your archival system at all, or the metadata and that sort of thing, or is that like a totally separate process?
So archiving is something we're struggling with right now. The Post didn't have a formal archiving system for a really long time, which we were all dismayed to find out. The way we're tackling it from a CMS perspective is actually to build it, this sounds counterintuitive, but we're building it as a separate CMS, but with the idea that ultimately it will mesh into Goldfish. It's the exact same team that's building both of them, but it means we're not at the mercy of that. So we're starting by just logging raw files, and ultimately we'll have tracking all the way across. So as opposed to editing off your desktop, you're editing off of, we're calling it Octopus for now. So you actually pull the raws down from Octopus. That way we'll be able to track what raws you're using that result in a finished file. which means we'll be able to make a clean metadata connection back to those raw files, even if it's tenuous. We say, some will say this shot is connected, and some will just be able to say this footage is related to this published piece, which has a ton of metadata, right? Because at that point we have captions, we have the full text of the article, we have all of the search terms and the machine learning terms from the front end, seeing what users interact with. So that's where we're going at. We just released V1 for internal newsroom use, which is just, again, sort of uploading raw and associating basic metadata about shots, locations, editors, what have you. Our next rollout is going to be in June, and that's going to get a little bit deeper in terms of being able to link files together. And we think by late summer we'll tap into, we use Adobe for all of our editing. So we'll tap into their APIs to be able to do that integration of Adobe editing off of Octopus. Yeah, I'll come back to you.
With the ease of publishing that Goldfish has enabled, have you noticed that video content from the post perspective has changed at all from, say, supplemental to print to now being primary with quicker news cycles where video is really the appropriate medium because it's more or less disposable?
Well, it's just allowed us to move so much faster. I mean, even 2 years ago, we were publishing maybe 12 videos a day. A typical day of publishing at the Post now is closer to 50 videos. So we've just cut down that friction where it used to, you'd wait for it to encode. Goldfish really has opened up the visibility for us, and that's part of why we did some of the changing of the technical processes on the back end. We can actually drill down and see if in the encoding process a particular stream failed and which stream failed. So it's just much faster for us to be able to troubleshoot. We can even make the call, which we ran into this about 2 years ago. There was one particular, I want to say it was WebM, but I might be wrong about that, which was consistently failing in the encoding process. We were able to sort of make the call that it was worth the risk to override and just publish the file anyway. We didn't have that kind of visibility or transparency before. So that's where it's really sort of sped up and improved what we can do. It also means that ease of use and that ability for anyone to walk in means that even the most junior person can publish video. You no longer kind of need to run it all the way up the chain to fix or solve. Yeah.
I assume since Bezos is your boss, you don't get charged every time you use Elastic Encoder, which is great.
We do. Yeah.
But I was going to ask, when I've looked at it, it's often seems, so I gave you a content question, so I've found it a little limited in stuff, and now that you guys also own, well, I shouldn't say you guys, Amazon also owns Elemental, have you thought about moving over there, or because it just seems like, oh, it does this, but not this, and this. Well, that's sort of
I can start answering that. Vidya would really be the better person to answer that because she really set up that infrastructure. And I'm certainly happy to put the two of you in touch. But I do know from talking to her that we've been quite happy with Elastic Transcoder, and we haven't found it to be particularly limiting. We are talking with Elemental. I mean, I'm always keen to talk to new folks and new tools and new processes, even if we ultimately decide that it's not the right route to go.
I'm not happy.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Yeah.
How much influence, if any, did Bezos bring or getting technical input from Amazon folks? There are lots of kind of software-oriented terms. Is that something that was already building in the company, or something they brought kind of fresh?
No, it's a good question. I mean, he didn't buy the Post until Goldfish and many other platforms were well underway. Shailesh Prakash, who's the CTO, was the CTO before and continues to be our CTO. So we were already developing this. The real change that I saw, both within the newsroom and working on product, is that we had a little bit more runway that was felt across the board. So Shailesh was always very supportive of us building this, but Bezos coming in just sort of reinforced support that we already had. I do think that he really pushed us and continues to push us to think about the user experience, both ends of that, right? Both within the newsroom and for the readers. The story that I usually tell about this is Vidya and I together control the product roadmap. And there was some player cleanup and improvements that we'd just been dying to do that kept getting pushed because this feature request or this special project that we were working on, and we kept sort of inserting it into the roadmap. And I want to say like 4 months after Bezos bought us, we got a flurry of emails being like, have you looked at player improvements? And we were like, yes, yes, it's right here. We're really keen. So there was a lot of support to do that kind of, not sexy, not flashy. What is it going to do? It's going to improve your performance dashboards on the back end, which is really refreshing as somebody who's working on product. I have support to do that sort of fine incremental tuning, even if it's not the flashiest thing in the world. Largely not, because so much of it is API driven, and I think everyone's sort of on that boat at this point and is pretty comfortable. I think that the first time that we really tried to swap out a process in the back end, it took us not more time than we thought, but it was just as hairy and complicated and frustrating as we suspected that it would be. So that was just a lesson to make sure that we really built in that time. I would say the other thing is that while the newsroom really signed on to sort of be the first wave of QA testing on this platform, you do have to do some extra work to both organize that force and to get them comfortable with what that means. What does it mean to write an effective bug ticket? What does it mean to test across platforms? And there's been a lot of eagerness and willingness to sort of rise to that challenge and figure that out. But we did have to put some extra work into getting people up to speed on that and sort of seeing what that looked like. Yeah?
What tracking solution?
Say it again?
Tracking?
Tracking? Yeah, we use a multitude across the newsroom. So really more from an editorial perspective, we're using daily both Chartbeat and Omniture to track starts and other user information. On the back end for processes and effectiveness, we're using Sumo Logic. And we have opened up both ends of those dashboards. So just because Sumo is primarily being used by our developers, the newsroom still has access to all of those dashboards, and they've actually set up custom ones for us. So for example, we found that within Sumo, we could do a much finer drill down about where we were getting video start traffic from than we could get from Omniture. So the devs built us a custom dashboard for that, just to be able to plop in a UUID and see where someone had embedded the video and where we're getting video starts from. So that back and forth conversation's been really helpful. Other questions?
I'm just so jealous of you guys being able to test. I know it's a big thing with Bezos.
We're really excited about it. We're really excited about it. And like I said, it's still like a bright, shiny new thing. When on my train back to DC tonight, I actually have to write up a report about how it's going. So I'll have more to say in the coming months. All right, thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it.